Behold, Drake's Plate. The plate of brass. California's choicest archaeological treasure. That was Professor Herbert Bolton's announcement at a 1921 press conference. It was a career-defining moment for the respected historian, where he supposedly uncovered the greatest historical revelation of the century. The discovery of Drake's Plate ended the debate about whether England or Spain claimed the shores of California first. But as the world looked on, Bolton unknowingly presented something far from the whole truth. Rare details behind the earth-shattering California treasure that changed history. Known as one of the world's great American historians, Professor Bolton specialized in Spanish-American history. In fact, he was so adept that they called his prime working years the Bolton era. His findings were always highly anticipated, but one discovery went on to shock the world. It was no secret that Professor Bolton grew starry-eyed over the prospect of finding the legendary Drake's Plate. He told his students the story of Sir Francis Drake leaving the plaque as a marker of his claim to California. However, Bolton never actually thought he'd live his dream of discovering the plate. That is, until one fateful day when a stranger showed up at his door. In 1937, the professor was approached by a visitor who found something peculiar on a hike. It was a brass plaque with English lettering carved into it. When Professor Bolton looked over it with care, his eyes widened as realization rushed over him. This was Drake's Plate. Not being one for history, the stranger needed a quick explanation for the professor's sudden enthusiasm. Dating back to the 1500s, Drake's Plate is a long-lost artifact of great historical debate. In the age of exploration, imperialist nations like England, Spain, and France laid claims on North American territories. There was a race between England and Spain for the area that later became the state of California. England won, but the evidence disappeared. The English naval officer Sir Francis Drake asserted he was the first to land ashore. His crew validated his claim, saying he took a brass plate and carved a declaration that California was taken in honor of Queen Elizabeth I. Since the plate was considered lost, the claim disappeared along with it. Fast forward to 1937, Professor Bolton had the plate in his hand, or so he thought. Elated with the discovery, Professor Bolton immediately gathered a large audience of his colleagues, which included his friends from the E Clampus Vitus historical fraternity, nicknamed the Clampers for short. The audience was excited by the prospect of discovery, and given the venue of the Sir Francis Drake Hotel, they knew they were in for something special. Professor Bolton took to the stage proudly. He announced his discovery of Drake's Plate and held it high for all to see. The crowd roared, with every single historian celebrating the professor's triumph, well, except for Professor Bolton's Clamper brothers. They knew the real truth behind the plate, but the opportunity to let their friend down easily had slipped away. While Professor Bolton enjoyed the fame of realizing his dream, his friends G. Ezra Dane, George Haviland Barron, George C. Clark, Albert Dressler, and Lawrence Knoll grimaced. They tried to convince him the artifact was a fake, but the professor remained adamant that it was the real deal. Little did he realize that his friends had their information firsthand. Technology in the late 30s wasn't advanced enough to detect the so-called Drake's Plate as a fake. Still, aside from the Clampers fraternity members, there were other skeptics, but they didn't have the evidence to prove it. Professor Bolton's discovery was placed in museums, written about in historical documents, and even taught in schools. It wasn't until the late 1970s that something changed. In 1977, in honor of the 400th anniversary of Sir Francis Drake's arrival, Berkeley scientists Helen Michel and Frank Assaro joined forces to take a deeper look at the plate. From the moment they drilled into the brass material, they realized the disappointing truth. Based on the way the material came apart and the composition of the metals within, it was obvious that brass was a recent creation. Naturally, the experts wondered who was responsible for the fraud. It's possible the true story would have stayed a secret if one Clamper's brothers been able to keep up the charade. Everything came out in the open in 1953, after Professor Bolton and nearly every player involved in the scheme had passed away, save for one. The lone survivor Lawrence Knoll came clean about what really happened. He revealed the true reason the group pulled a fast one on the professor. It was written down, but never used in the case against the fake artifact that Dane, Barron, Clark, Dressler, and Knoll worked together to prank Bolton. Knoll confessed that Dane, a prominent member of the Clampers fraternity and the California Historical Society, instigated the whole thing without the rest of the fraternity's support. The small group of men acted alone. Barron, a historical curator and a leading member of the California Historical Society, designed the plate using text from a detailed account of Drake's voyage. Barron's friend and neighbor, Clark, an inventor, art critic, and appraiser, designed the layout and chiseled the lettering. Then, Knoll explained his part in the scam. As an art dealer and restorer, Knoll, with the help of Dressler, added the fraternity's initials to the back of the piece. They planned to hide the phony plate out in the open for someone to find. Then, when Bolton came to share his discovery with them, they'd make the big reveal and share a big laugh. Of course, that's not how it played out. The group of pranksters never considered the chance of their friend jumping ahead to authenticate the piece so quickly, but when it happened, they felt they couldn't outright tell him the truth. While they left indirect hints that the plate could be fake, for the most part, they kept quiet about the joke that went out of control. In 1954, Knoll shared the secret with the editor of the Pony Express. He convinced Knoll to issue a signed written statement confessing the details of the prank. However, it wasn't until decades after science revealed the truth, in 2003, that Knoll's statement was finally released to the public. In a press conference at the University of California, Berkeley, researchers shared the story behind one of the greatest hoaxes in history. While it was common knowledge the plate was fake, Knoll's confession was presented to the audience. Finally, everyone knew who the culprits were behind the fraud. While this news was unfortunate overall, Berkeley released the following statement. The hoax has had positive impacts that include increased public awareness of the state's explorer-era history and a wide range of related research. Professor Herbert E. Bolton wasn't alive to see his greatest achievement turned out to be a convoluted prank, but thankfully, the mistake hasn't reflected badly on him. In spite of the Drake's Plate hiccup, Bolton was still considered one of America's great historians. Still, he never found the treasure of his dreams. Perhaps he should have guessed a stranger handing him a historically significant artifact was too good to be true. Usually discovering treasure involves a bit more elbow grease, but it does happen, like these rare artifacts that rewrote history books. Inside the Dead Sea Scrolls, researchers found the Copper Scroll, a series of metal plates wound into a scroll. They reportedly contained locations to ancient treasures, but referenced areas that are now lost in the modern era. Outside of Blue Hill, Maine, a man named Guy Melgren found a Viking coin. What makes this discovery so special that it's the only pre-Columbian Norse artifact ever found in the United States, according to the Smithsonian Institute. Christianity defined the culture of medieval Europe. Being sacrilegious could be a death sentence. It's ironic that one of the most demonic books of all time, the Codex Gigas, originated from that era. The artifact is a Bible with the devil painted on the front, and it was rumored to be written by a single monk who was helped by Satan. Some puzzling sites that have been discovered across Central Europe are small 12-sided figures called Roman dodecahedrons. These round, hollow items are periodically dug up by archaeologists, but their meaning is a mystery. The Antikythera mechanism was a clock-like mechanism invented by the ancient Greeks. They used the machine to track planet and star positions with extreme precision. Their expert navigational skills demonstrate just how advanced this society was. The Shroud of Turin is rumored to be Jesus Christ's burial cloth. There's the outline of a bearded face etched into the fabric. New testing found ferritin iron bound to creatinine in an unusual manner, indicating it covered someone who had been recently tortured. Witches were a major concern for the 17th century English population. To combat their foes, they made witch bottles. Clay vessels with nails, hair, and various bodily substances that were buried near the witch's house. These have been dug up around England, with their contents perfectly intact. In southern Iraq, researchers are studying 7,000-year-old statues of hybrid reptilian humanoid men, women, and women holding babies, the Ubaid lizardmen. These originated from the start of the lost Sumerian civilization. The Voynich manuscript is a document that has puzzled researchers for generations. This artifact originated from the 15th century, and no one is sure what it says, as it's full of unintelligible writing and strange symbols. The unknown authors wrote the book in a mysterious code that still hasn't been deciphered. The Ulfbert swords are a pair of incredibly strong 10th century Viking swords, with the phrase Ulfbert inscribed on them. Ulfbert is theorized to be their mysterious creator. The Norse were so skilled at their craft that no other sword maker could match their quality until the late 1700s. In Western Europe, archaeologists have had the unpleasant job of pulling a dozen bog bodies from their local boglands. The acidic environment, cold temperatures, and low oxygen levels remarkably preserve the skin of these prehistoric humans, tanning it in the process. Originally suggested to commemorate a Native American peace treaty, the Winnipesaukee stone is an oval stone with a group of carvings centered around a human face. Scientists still aren't sure of its true meaning, but it sure is eye-catching. The Xingxinghui were one culture who lived in China during the Bronze Age. In 1986, archaeologists discovered jade, ceramic, and bronze artifacts, uncovering more information about the civilization. Many of the figures were smashed as well. A meteor smashed into Sri Lanka in 2012. When scientists examined the alien stone, they found fossilized algae in the rock. There's still a major debate between researchers about where the algae originated and how it appeared on the meteor. When a mysterious young woman's body was removed from the Seine River in Paris around 1900, her look inspired a morbid fashion trend. French women wanted to copy the woman's hair, makeup, and pallid visage. A major cache of Roman gold was discovered in the UK. The coins were from Alexandria and wouldn't have had any value outside of the city, so finding them so far away has mystified researchers. The Calixtlahuaca head is a giant stone head uncovered by archaeologist Jose Garcia Payen near Mexico City. This carving was thought to be the same age as the nearby Tacaxic heads, but instead it was dated to 1476 to 1510 AD. It could be a fragment of some larger statue. Near two mastodon bones, a wedge-like metal object was found. The bones were 11,000 years old, but the metal object was aluminum, which wasn't invented until 1808. This surprising find was dubbed the Aud aluminum artifact. Archaeologists found the site of an ancient massacre in Sweden. The attack happened in the 5th century, but researchers aren't sure who the perpetrators were. They've discovered the bodies of 26 people who were killed with axes, swords, and clubs. Based on recovered objects, an early group of humans who lived in India wielded advanced weapons much sooner than scientists realized. People supposedly migrated to the massive continent 60,000 years ago, but this means they could have arrived much sooner. Ever heard of the Great Wall of Texas? This structure is at least 200,000 to 400,000 years old. A group of farmers in Rockwall Company, Texas, unearthed this lost site in 1852 while they were digging a well. There are debates within the scientific community about whether or not the wall was man-made. Because the rocks are similarly magnetized, some researchers think the structure is actually a natural geologic formation. When a French factory opened its shipment of uranium ore from Oklo, Gabon Republic, they were shocked. The uranium had already been extracted from the rocks. This is something that is very unlikely to occur naturally. Uranium needs specific conditions to be extracted from ore. There's a theory that the uranium in Oklo came from a nuclear reactor that operated 1.8 billion years ago. We're not scientists, but this doesn't scream factual to us. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig discovered a pair of 2,000-year-old batteries in Baghdad, Iraq, in 1938. These archaic batteries were made from clay jars complete with asphalt stoppers and iron rods. The craziest thing? They actually work. When the batteries were functional, they could generate more than a volt of electricity. The next time you're tired of paying your electric bill, consider trying out a setup like this to save some cash. In a cave near Mount Baigong, China, researchers made an amazing discovery: 150,000-year-old pipes. These led from a large room in the cave to a lake, meaning they were very likely an ancient form of plumbing. A geology fellow from China's Earthquake Administration analyzed material from the tubes and found that some of it was extremely radioactive. Some of the material couldn't be identified by researchers either. One of earliest maps of Antarctica was drawn in 1513 by Turkish Admiral Piri Reis. The map depicts a coastline that lies far to the south of South America. The odd thing? Antarctica wasn't covered in ice. Captain Lorenzo W. Burroughs, a U.S. Air Force captain, confirmed that the coastline in the ancient map matched modern-day Antarctica's, now concealed by water. It's impressive that Piri Reis created such an accurate model so long ago. One of the oldest bridges in the world was a million-year-old structure that stretched between India and Sri Lanka. This build was supposedly constructed by King Rama, if you believe the long-standing Indian stories. There's a debate among researchers whether this bridge actually existed. Some geologists believe there are patterns on the boulders to indicate artificial movement, but others argue that satellite imagery proves it's natural. When three California friends found an odd object inside of a geode in 1961, they knew they had a serious mystery on their hands. They took the rock to a geologist who identified the material as 500,000 years old. In the middle was what appeared to be a spark plug. The rock discoverers thought they'd found proof of a secret technologically advanced civilization. The geode, called the Kozo artifact, has since been lost, so it looks like we'll never know the truth. Get back to work. A construction crew in Aix-en-Provence, France, came across an ancient job site. While they were digging, they found tools encased in limestone, 50 feet below the surface of the ground. The wood in the tools had morphed into agate during their time under the earth. Because the limestone formed quickly around the materials, they were preserved. Without this, they would have withered into nothing. And a lot of what we use today dates back to ancient Greece, an archaeologist's daydream. Maps weren't invented until the Greeks came along. These people produced the first cartographer, who went on to make the first map of the entire world. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.